Hello, and welcome to demonstrating fat over lean and washing oily brushes. First, I'll whip up a glass palette. I'll need a piece of plywood, a gray piece of paper, a piece of glass, a glass cutter and a ruler, some sandpaper, and some duct tape. I've cut my paper, and now I'm measuring out the glass and giving a plus 1/8 inch variance. Could be more if you like. I'm cutting this glass to be a bit smaller than the scrap of ply that I have. Primarily, I'm protecting the edge of the glass so that it won't be cracked by a simple knock or accidental bang. It also provides a bit of ledge to hold on to. Once the measurements are laid out, I line up my ruler and, using the glass cutter, I score the glass, applying continuous pressure. After a few taps, I place my ruler under the glass to the left of the score and give it a light smack to snap it. Once the glass is cut to size, I use a piece of 220 grit sandpaper to ease the edges so they aren't so sharp. I'm using a gray paper because it's a good neutral ground to read my colors against. It reduces optical blending that might occur if the palette was warmer or cooler, lighter or darker. Folding my tape into little triangles, I stick the paper in place so it doesn't come out of registration. Then I lay the glass over top. There are many ways to hold down your glass top. Personally, I like something a little less permanent, so I'm not going to glue or use any caulking to adhere the glass straight to the plywood. I like duct tape for this. It's cheap and makes it easy to replace if needed. Before I get started, I push my containers of linseed and solvent onto the plate. Then, I coat my hands liberally with barrier cream, making sure to get in all the nooks and crannies. I prefer this over gloves. You should always try to limit direct skin contact with paints and solvents, especially if you're using toxic pigments like cobalts or cadmiums. When using solvents, you should always make sure that you limit how much solvent you're being exposed to at any one time, and have really good ventilation. Just to the right of me is an open window, and there's a fan creating a slight breeze to my left. Now, let's get into the painting bit of this. With a smidge of phthalo and flake white, I'll quickly show the subtle differences between dilution with solvent for a lean layer which would commonly be used for underpainting, and dilution with linseed for a fat layer used for glazing. The rule fat over lean reminds painters to apply fatty or oilier layers over top of leaner or thinner layers beneath. This is because they dry at different speeds, and if you apply a lean layer over top of a fat layer, it is likely to crack. First, I mix a little solvent with the phthalo blue. Note, I'm closing the cup after each use to limit exposure. Add a bit of white to lighten it up, and maybe a little more solvent. Let's see it on some white paper. It's good to clean in between different colors and processes. Wipe the excess paint onto a rag, then swish the brush around in a can of vegetable oil to dilute and dislodge the paint. For a fulsome cleaning, add a little water to your brush cleaning well and whip up a soapy lather to clean the hairs. I dip my brush in and lather it up with soap, rinse, and repeat as necessary. Nice and clean for the next go. Let's do the same mixture with some linseed instead. Add linseed to your paint until it gets to a nice, smooth consistency that's easy to push around. You'll notice immediately when you lay down the paint next to the lean layer that there is a difference between them. The fatty layer should have more of a sheen to it. Here again, I clean off my brush the same as earlier. A swish in the vegetable oil, a wash with some soap, and a rinse with some water. See there, nice and clean. And now, I'll just mess about and repeat the process with just the phthalo, no white added. You can see just how much the white contributes to the opacity in the body of the paint. What about the same, this time with just phthalo and solvent? Let's see what that looks like. Oops, just wash that little smear off. Here, let's take a look at the paint a little closer. I don't know if you can see it well here, but in the solvent mixture, you can see little cracks, fjords, and islands where the paint is separating as the solvent breaks apart the bonds. This image is from an earlier mixture. In the linseed mixture, we're just adding more vehicle and dispersing the pigment more. One more look at those samples and we can see a slight range of different attributes between them. The linseed adds a sheen to the paint and the solvent dulls it down. If you're done painting for the day, let your brushes dry with the bristles pointing down or horizontally. You don't want any moisture moving into the ferrule, that metal collar that holds the bristles to the handle. That could erode the glue and the wood in the handle, ultimately ruining your brush. Also, don't leave brushes in your oil can, solvent, or water for long periods. That will curl the bristles and ruin the point. Let's tidy up a bit now. We can play around with our leftovers. I find it easiest to scrape off the palette now and give it a wipe down rather than leave it to dry. And it gets a little harder if you leave it till later. Thank you for joining me. If you want to know more about the technical world of art, like and subscribe.